Background: the legacy of World War One. 10 million people died in the First World War of 1914 to 1918. In France, an area the size of Wales was totally destroyed. In addition, nearly 9 million civilians died from starvation, disease, artillery fire and air raids. The human cost of the war, in terms of damaged minds and bodies, ruined lives, was beyond calculation. With regards to making peace in November 1918, Germany had signed a ceasefire. It was called the Armistice. The Germans could fight no longer, but they did not think that they had surrendered. In January 1919, delegates from 32 countries met at Versailles, near Paris, to make treaties to end the war. Unlike other treaties in history, the Treaty of Versailles was not negotiated between Germany and the Allies. Only the Allies were invited to the conference, and they believed they had won. They imposed their terms upon Germany. When the Russians had stopped fighting in 1917, the Germans had made them sign the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. It took lots of land from Russia. When they heard this, many Allied politicians decided that they would be just as tough on Germany. The aims of the Big Three. The three most important men at the Versailles Conference, the Big Three, were George Clemenceau, the Prime Minister of France, Woodrow Wilson, the President of America, and David Lloyd George, the Prime Minister of Britain. All three men wanted to stop a war ever happening again, but they did not agree about how to do this. They wanted different things from the peace, and they did not get on well. George Clemenceau wanted revenge and to punish the Germans for what they had done. He wanted to make Germany pay for the damage done during the war. He also wanted to weaken Germany, so France would never be invaded again. Woodrow Wilson wanted to make the world safe. He wanted to end war by making a fair peace. And in 1918, Wilson published 14 points saying what he wanted. This included world disarmament and a League of Nations where countries could talk about their problems without war. David Lloyd George said that he wanted to make Germany pay because he knew that this was what the British people wanted to hear. Overall, however, he wanted justice and he did not want revenge. He said that the peace must not be harsh so that this would not cause another war in a few years' time, and instead he tried to create a halfway point, a compromise between Wilson and Clemenceau. The main points of the treaty. When thinking about the terms of the Treaty of Versailles and exam questions, you ought to remember the letters B, R, A and T, or BRAC for short. B is for blame, as Germany had to accept the blame for starting the war under clause 231. R is for reparations. Germany had to pay £6,600 million, called reparations, for the damage done during the war. This is approximately £500 billion in today's money. Germany was already suffering financially due to 4 long years of war, but this was seen as being incredibly high. A is for army. Germany was forbidden to have submarines or an air force. She could have a navy but of only 6 battleships and an army of just 100,000 men. In addition, Germany was not allowed to place any troops in the Rhineland, the strip of land 50 miles wide next to France. And finally, T is for territory. Germany lost territory, meaning land, in Europe, and Germany's colonies were given to France and Britain. German reactions to the treaty. When the Germans heard about the Treaty of Versailles, they felt humiliation, pain and anger. They felt that it had been extremely unfair. They had not been allowed to take part in the talks, they had just been told to sign, and at first they refused to sign the treaty. Some Germans actually wanted to start the war all over again. The Germans were in particularly angry at clause 231. They said that they were not to blame for the war. The soldier sent to sign the treaty actually refused to sign it. He said to say such a thing would be a lie. The Germans were also angry about reparations. They said that France and Britain were trying to starve their children to death. At first they refused to pay and only started paying after threats from Britain and France. The Germans were angry about their tiny army. They said that they were helpless against other countries. At first they refused to reduce the army, and the sailors sank the fleet rather than hand it over to the Allied nations. The Germans also thought that the loss of territory was unfair. Germany lost a tenth of its land. Other nations were given self-determination, but the treaty forced Germans to live in other countries. Germans were also angry that they could never unite with the Austrian Germans.